tide, man, he's a coming. The tide's meant to come in, yeah, 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 yeah.
There you go. It is October 23rd. Welcome to Let's Talk Native on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio. No buffalo speeches, no mystic healing, no special Indian prayers. We tackle the real issues facing Native people, look back at our glorious and our grave history, a tough look at where we're at now, and look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network. We run live here from our network at www.ltnradionet.com. We stream live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation, and we simulcast on the Gway and rebroadcast on the Gway at CKWE in Tandanega. And, of course, we run Facebook Live. We are streaming live on Facebook as we speak here, and that is an opportunity for you to weigh in with your comments, and it is something that I try to monitor while I'm doing the show. I got to admit I don't walk and chew gum that well, so I've got to usually catch up on the comments during the break. But I do try to keep an eye on it, and if something can capture my attention while I'm rambling on, then I try to bring that in. I got a couple of things I'm going to talk about. I am going to talk about economics, and I know that's a pretty dry subject, so you're going to have to bear with me and understand that there's a reason that I want to talk about it. And it does tie back to some of the battle that's going on between the Seneca Nation and the state of New York over revenue sharing. But, it's a bigger picture than that. It really ties into the great lie that is the global economy and so much of what we're being spoon-fed about the way our lives are being orchestrated by capitalism. So we'll talk about a variety of things, but I am going to talk specifically some numbers, and I'm going to talk specifically about some of the issues that I think are being missed in the conversation between the Seneca Nation and the state of New York, and more specifically between the Seneca Nation and the powers that be in Niagara Falls, Buffalo, Salamanca, and frankly, the press, the media. And I'll talk about a little bit of a response that I had to an article in the Niagara Gazette. But we'll catch up on that. But the first thing I want to do, I really need to give a shout out to my friends down in Philadelphia. Mostly this afternoon. They're done now, but my friends who showed up at the football game between the Eagles and the Washington franchise to protest the name of the Washington franchise. And, this is, it's tough. It's tough because you're going into hostile territory anytime that you're going to try to take a stand against things like the mascot issue. And I don't care if you're going into a hostile territory at a high school. And trust me, I know, because I was one of the folks who spoke out against the Lancaster high school here in Western New York, who ultimately changed their names to the Lancaster Legends. But I mean, I was getting all kinds of threats. I was getting all kinds of hate mail. There were some sites that were established where my picture was photoshopped, and I was being accused of being on the take from from Ray Hallbritter. I mean, all kinds of stuff. It was just craziness. But this is it is tough to sustain this this fight over the mascot issue, and although there are many of us who will weigh in from time to time, and you've heard me, I played some of the audio from More Than a Word, and I've been involved in a couple of interviews, but also documentaries on this subject. It's something that we again, it's a tough thing to stay involved with. I mean, that's why you see so many people burn out. You notice you haven't heard when Ray Halberter and the Oneida Nation, threw a bunch of money at their publicity stunt involved in this thing, it was like flash in the pan. Now you never hear his name again. But you know what? There are still people that are just as engaged today as they were long before Ray Halberter and his Oneida Indian Nation of New York threw money at this thing. While he was spending $1 million on floats at the Macy's parade, which kind of almost fits into this whole idea of mascotry. There have been plenty of us that have put our names and our faces and on the line on this stuff, and so we can go all the way back to Suzanne Harjo and Amanda Blackhorse and Tara Hauska and Greg Deal and so many people who have weighed in various ways on this thing. And of course, Donna Van Boyle, some of my and so many other friends that I've gotten to know. And the reason I've gotten to know them is because there are high schools in Massachusetts, Tewksbury. There's in Neshaminy in Pennsylvania. In Delaware, the Red Clay School District. There's all these places that almost all white people live there. Certainly, hardly any Native people. And yet they appropriate these names and they use these names without any consideration for what they're doing with cultural images, with whether it's articles of clothing or dance, or they just make a complete mockery of the whole thing. But it's a long haul. I mean, it is not easy to stay engaged in this kind of long-term battle, because we never expect this thing to change quickly. I mean, I think the fight that or I don't want to say it was our fight in Lancaster. I got asked to participate in the conversation in Lancaster, and I was amazed at how quickly we helped that school board come to the right conclusion and the right decision to vote unanimously to change the name. It doesn't usually go that well, and of course that didn't happen without conflict. I mean, some of those folks, some of those school board members, felt the wrath of some of those very racist people in Lancaster, and that's what we face in all of this stuff. So again, I got to give a shout out to all of those folks who showed up at the Philadelphia football game this afternoon, in the run up to the game that's I guess is going on tonight, and I'm not. Obviously, I'm not paying attention. I don't watch Monday Night Football. In fact, I've been boycotting football since the whole Colin Kaepernick thing goes on. Yeah, sure, I'll hear scores, but I won't watch it. I won't watch a football game. So, and I'm not sure how long. I mean, I've kind of lost interest in it over the years anyway. But if you live, if you live in the world, you become aware of certain things, like the Astros and the Dodgers playing in the World Series. I didn't watch any of the run up to that, but you just kind of know it, right? So anyway, my main thing is I wanted to give a shout out to those folks who carrying signs and putting themselves, in the crosshairs of some of the people who feel so strongly about being able to appropriate Native images. So my hat's off to those guys. All right, so here's the thing. Getting back on the subject of economics, I guess. There was an article in the Niagara Gazette this week, and it didn't really address the financial issues that much. But what it did was it said that the county legislature, whatever, the county reps, I guess, voted unanimously on two resolutions, both which, one specifically for the city of Niagara Falls and one for the county of Niagara County, where they were calling upon the governor to resolve this conflict with the Seneca Nation expeditiously, as quickly as possible. Now, they didn't say how exactly, and I don't know if I didn't see the actual language of the resolutions, but I'm just going by what the article said. And there were certain statements that were made in the article. I mean, they make these, they say, well, the governor officially declared the Seneca Nation in breach of the compact. For one thing, the governor can't declare anybody in breach of the compact. That's something that arbitration would have to determine. He can charge that in the media and every place else that the Senecas have breached the compact, but he he's not authorized to make the official declaration of whether a breach took place or not. So I had to address some of those things, because what's happened is each time, whether it's the Buffalo News or the Niagara Gazette or any of the television networks and radio networks for that matter here in Western New York, they still have a tendency to frame the story as if the Senecas have just arbitrarily decided one day to not pay the state anymore, and that somehow the Senecas are withholding payments, that the Senecas decided not to pay the state anymore. And none of that is an accurate characterization of the situation. I mean, the bottom line is, and I've said it a bunch of times, but I'll say it again, the compact that was entered into in 2002 laid out a payment, a revenue sharing payment schedule, I guess you would call it, schedule and percentages for 14 years. And 14 years only. Now, after 14 years, there was a renewal provision that if neither side had any objections, the compact, which most of the compact has to do with regulating or certain protocols that the casino will operate under. And it's not necessarily under the authority of the state. I mean, some of it is the protocols that the Seneca Nation has established, and that the state and the Senecas came to agreements on. You know, what kind of gaming is going to take place? You know, what are going to be the checks and balances? How are they going to make sure that money isn't stolen? And you know, just a variety of things. Everything from types of surveillance to how the machines are checked, and how the payouts are done. All this stuff is laid out in this compact. One of the more insignificant parts of the compact is the revenue sharing provision, because, and I say it's insignificant because that is not a requirement. There's no requirement that there be revenue sharing in a state native compact. And in fact, the underlying federal law, the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, says that if revenue sharing is going to occur, there are some standards that need to be met. And because the one thing that the IGRA, the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, made very clear is the states can't tax native casinos. They are entitled to no revenue from the gaming operation. Now, that's not to say that the natives can't, the native territories can't make a purchase from the state for property or do some sort of commercial transaction with the state. But in terms of ongoing revenue from gaming, the states are entitled to none. Now, that's just the baseline, right? But a provision that that IGRA does allow is that if the native territories and the states can come to terms on revenue sharing, then it has to be done in such a way that the state gives something of value in exchange for what that revenue sharing will look like. And that something of value has to be both substantial and quantifiable. Now, if you listen to the show, I've said these words a bunch of times. But it's really necessary that people understand this. By substantial, it means that whatever the revenue sharing is that the state is receiving, the substantial and quantifiable concession that the state made for that revenue sharing, it has to be somewhat equal. So, if the revenue sharing is $100 million a year, then whatever the state gave up has to be worth $100 million a year. And that's a debate that all by itself. But that's not why this revenue sharing came to an end. What happened was when they established this revenue sharing, they said, look, for the first 4 years, the Senecas will give 18% of the net slot drop. And that's the money that goes into a slot machine minus the payout of a slot machine. If you could look at it almost as an individual slot machine, but these are the machines in total, I guess, for each facility. So the net slot drop from these slot machines, 18% would go to the state for years 1 through 4. Years 5 through 7, that would go up to 22%, and then years 8 through 14, it was 25%. And that is the only language in the compact about revenue sharing. There's nothing that says anything about revenue sharing beyond 14 years. And when I say there's nothing, I mean there's nothing about it going beyond that in terms of years or or any hint or even suggestion about what a rate would be if there's some sort of implication or or assumption that it would continue? I mean, it is silent on both the percentages and the continuation by years. So when this thing reached 14 years, the Senecas just stopped paying because that's what the compact said. It's just you pay through year 14. And then they started seeing both the state and a couple of the municipalities, and I'm not sure if it was all three of them, Niagara Falls, Buffalo, and Salamanca, or just a number of them. They started seeing some of the preliminary budgets that were being kicked out, for consideration for 2017, and they saw that the state and some of these municipalities were including gaming revenue for 2017, and the Seneca Nation said, "Wait a second, there's no revenue sharing for 2017 that ended in December of 2016." And the crazy part is everybody knew this. They knew what the language was. I mean, it's not like the compact is a secret. And it's not like it wasn't really, really scrutinized only a few years ago in 2013 when there was a bit of a dispute over the state essentially violating, the state being in breach of the exclusivity arrangement that they offered for this revenue sharing. I mean, this has been a document that has been pretty well read, and the language is pretty clear. But everybody, all of a sudden, Buffalo, Niagara Falls, and Salamanca, and New York State pretended they were shocked. Like, oh, the Senecas just pulled a fast one on us. No, there's nothing fast about something that took 14 years to expire. I mean, that's not fast. That's pretty slow. I mean, I had somebody. Well, anyway, so this is what the was the gist of the article in the Niagara Gazette. But it talked about them trying to get the governor to resolve this thing. Now, again, a lot of language in there was mischaracterized, and I addressed what I thought was some of that language that really made the story read like the state's narrative rather than an unbiased opinion or an unbiased reporting of facts. But the problem that I have is anybody who assumes that the way this thing has to be resolved is that the governor has to get the revenue sharing continued is not quite understanding some basic economic facts. And here it is. Here's the problem. In order for Niagara Falls to receive $20 million a year and Salamanca and Buffalo to get, $5 million each a year. So in order for $30 million to stay here in Western New York, that means that $120 million had to go to Albany. That means almost $100 million leaves the area. So when I hear, Mike Smith or Byron Brown or Paul Deister or any of the city councilmen or whatever else, or county legislators saying they want the governor to, to fix this, what they're saying is they want to see additional money flow to Albany and 25% of that trickle back. And this is where I want to talk about some basic economic facts. For one thing, the Senecas, on average, this thing has been over $120 million a year that's gone to the state. And like I said, 25% of that comes back. But that's not the only benefit that non-Senecas get from Seneca Gaming. The obvious other benefit is employment. And most of the employment, and I want to say, I at one time it was as high as 90%, and maybe even as high as 95%, but 95% of the employees at many of the native gaming operations are non-native. So, I mean, there's a lot of non-native employment at Seneca Gaming. And even if the percentage is not high, it's certainly above 80. But that's a lot of money. It's $120 million a year in wages and salaries that are going to essentially, predominantly, tax-paying citizens of the state of New York. That's a huge economic stimulus for the area. Now, the other thing the Senecas do is they obviously buy a lot of goods and services. So the vendor contracts are also over $100 million. and these are all local vendors, and it definitely throws more money back into the Western New York economy. The downside is $100 million a year leaves the area. And I don't think anybody is considering the negative impact of that. And this is where I call upon, just, I don't care if it's an economic student. Somebody should do an assessment on that. Because here's the question that I have. If Niagara Falls is, whining about $16 million, being short $16 million in their budget this year, are they not considering the fact that if 120, 130, 150 million dollars doesn't go to New York, that there is some benefit to that money staying in the region? Now, I know the first thing everybody says, yeah, but the Senecas, they don't pay taxes. But you know what? Every product and service they buy stimulates the economy. It's $100 million a year in Western New York. A dollar doesn't, if a dollar just changes hands once, then it doesn't really retain the value that dollar can have to a region. It's one of the problems with a lack of local economy and local commerce. If every dollar that comes into an area immediately leaves, then there really isn't much in the way of economic benefit for that dollar coming into the region. So every dollar that leaves, before it's had a chance to change hands a few times, is actually a drain on the economy. So when $100 million a year leaves Western New York, even if $20 or $30 million comes back, if $100 million left, never to come back, what's the cost benefit there? I mean, what's the overall effects of that? And I got to think that if Niagara Falls and Buffalo and Salamanca had taken the Senecas up on their offer and said, okay, what can we do from at least from service agreements and that kind of stuff? I mean, there are things that we can provide to you that was kind of being covered by the revenue sharing before, and you guys can make some direct payments to us for a variety of things, whether it's police or ambulance or whatever it is. I mean, so what if Niagara Falls worked out an agreement, just a basic service agreement that was worth $5 or $6 million? Now, granted, that's not 11 and it's not 16 and it sure isn't 20. But what if it was $5 or $6 million? And then what if there were some other products or other programs that the Niagara Falls was doing that the Seneca Nation says, I'll cost share on some of that. And what if that number came up to $8 or even $10 million? Now that's $10 million directly to some place like Niagara Falls instead of the $20 million that they were getting before. But the $100 million didn't have to leave the area to reach that $20 million. That is my whole point. There is a certain amount of applause that should come from the elected officials here in Western New York when just on the prospect of $100 million a year more staying in Western New York instead of just being siphoned off by Albany. I mean, think about the whole Buffalo billion thing. All this noise and all this publicity and, of course, all this controversy that came along with the Buffalo billion, this promise from the governor to throw $1 billion into Western New York over the course of I don't know how many years. I mean, he hasn't done it yet. I mean, there's been some money that's flowed. But you know what? $1 billion that did flow? It was the $1 billion from the Seneca Nation that flowed out of the area. $1.5 billion went to revenue sharing over the 14 years of that agreement. 1.5, 400 million came back. So that means $1.1 billion left Western New York. That's the Buffalo billion. The Buffalo billion didn't come to Buffalo, it left Buffalo. And whatever trickled back, that 400 million, look, I'm not saying it's nothing. But if you don't consider the impact of that $1.1 billion leaving the area, if you're just going to look at the 400 million as this, some plus gain, without understanding that you lost revenue, you lost currency from the region, then shame on you for not understanding basic economics. There is a value in having money stay in an area for a while. And there's the one thing that is beyond question is that the Seneca Nation spends almost all of its money back here in West New York. And I mean all of its money. I mean not just from salaries and wages and vendor contracts, but all of the programs that the Seneca Nation has for its people, all of the all the other purchases they do, everything from cars to to contracts with not just with the gaming, but with the nation itself, and then the Seneca people themselves who receive dollars from the from the lease for these properties. So all the Seneca spend their money here in Western New York too. We don't exactly have a big retail sector on our territories. We don't have grocery stores. We have convenience stores, gas stations, tobacco shops, and a few other services. We have some construction companies and that kind of stuff. But for the most part, even if those dollars are spent here within the Seneca Nation, ultimately, when those dollars leave the Seneca Nation, they don't go to Albany. And they don't go to Washington. Most of it still gets spent right back here in Western New York. There is a tremendous economic benefit from every dollar that the Seneca Nation retains here in Western New York, because it doesn't retain it for long. It flows out of our territories into the outlying communities almost immediately. Now, if Buffalo, Niagara Falls, and Salamanca are fine with their economies being impacted by $1 billion leaving the region, which is what the governor's hoping for, and all of you who are in the papers or on TV and making on radio saying, "Oh, I hope the governor can get this revenue sharing back in place." What you're hoping for is that the governor will suck another $1 billion out of Western New York over the next 7 years, because that's what it would come to. I mean, do the math. It's $120 million, for 7 years. And that's if the Senecas don't do anything to enhance, some of their gaming experience, which they've always done and always do. I mean, this is not rocket science. I mean, this should be pretty easy to figure out. That even if the Seneca Nation does not have revenue sharing in place, that there's a tremendous benefit to that $120 to $150 million staying in the area. And if nobody has bothered to figure that out, if nobody's bothered to calculate that, then either that's a huge oversight, which, let's face it, politicians are good at that, or it's intentional. Yeah, perhaps it's intentional. Perhaps the whole idea of trying to demonize the Seneca Nation, because let's be clear, there are folks running for office in a couple of weeks when the election day rolls around. There are some people, specifically in Niagara Falls, who are running on an anti-Seneca platform. And this is where the article in the Gazette kind of tweaks me a little bit. Because, as you recall, what I said was that there was a unanimous vote to call on the governor to do this. So even the Republicans, because a lot of these, a lot of this is Democratic-controlled municipalities, right? But even the Republicans are saying to the Democratic governor, fix this. Instead of them saying, you know what, governor, just step away. We'll deal with the Senecas directly. We're gonna hedge our bets. We don't think you're gonna persevere in arbitration, and I'll talk about that after the break here. But we don't think you're gonna persevere in arbitration. And frankly, we would rather deal directly with the Senecas anyway. It's been nothing but cumbersome and problematic having the state involved. Even when the state breached the compact, the Senecas back in between 2009 and 2013, they said, "Look, we'll make direct payments to Western New York. But when we resolve this conflict, we want to make sure that the state credits us with the dollars we gave to those municipalities." And the state refused. So the Senecas couldn't make or keep Niagara Falls and Buffalo and Salamanca whole. And it was because of it was because of this same governor, Andrew Cuomo. So even the party opposed, the Republicans are stacking up behind the governor on this thing. And maybe it's because they think they can throw him under a bus with it, but they aren't they won't come right out and say, you know what, we're going to meet with the Senecas. You Democrats, you can stay up, stay packed in behind Andrew Cuomo, but we're not going to do that. We think the Senecas are offering something that we should listen to. And frankly, if you factor in what I'm talking about here, the benefits of having $100 million a year stay in the region, I'm not saying they're going to turn around and plop it all on the desk of Mayor Paul Deister. But you know what? Erie County and Niagara County, those two counties are going to benefit most, even more so than Cattaraugus County. I don't think Salamanca is in as big a world of hurt as people think it is, because ultimately Salamanca is owned by the Seneca Nation. 95% of the city of Salamanca is on Seneca land. But Erie County and Niagara County, there's a lot of money that's coming into your area from this gaming, even in the absence of revenue sharing. All right, we're at the bottom of the hour, so we'll take a break here and we'll go out with it's almost a standard for me. But I think when you think about guys like Murray Porter, who kind of paints the picture about how we are viewed by the outside, you gotta think Reds Blues.
Red blue, red blue, red blue, baby, red blue. Every kind of people got every kind of blues, but red man's got red blue. Go to work every day for that minimum wage. There's a guy, blonde hair, blue eyes, just about your age. Hasn't worked that is half as long as you. He makes twice as much money as you do. Red blue, red blue, red blue. Red blue, after work, I go home, make myself a drink, grab a glass, a few ice cubes, walk on over to the sink. My old lady says that I ought not to. You'll get sick if you drink that water. Red blue, red blue. Red blue, baby, red blue. Every kind of people got every kind of blues, but a red man's got red blues. All right.
That's a little bit of Res Blues from Murray Porter. Gotta love that stuff. And what I like about Murray's songs is that he will bring a contemporary issue into his lyrics, and he'll talk about real life circumstances. I mean, the fact that we've got contaminated water in our territories, the fact that unemployment is so high, the poverty level, there's so many problems, living on a native territory, and it's one of those things that. kind of leads to the attrition of some of our best and our brightest on our territories because they're, I remember, I remember when Obama gave a speech at Mandela's funeral, and he talked about the fact that there are still places in the world where the prospects for the future for young people just isn't there, and I'm thinking, man, you don't have to travel the world to see that. You can see that on any native territory, and the reason we have such poor prospects for the future is because of because of U.S. policy. So that's what I like about Murray Porter. He gets right to the point. He makes he makes his point, and he does it with music, and he does it with song, and in many ways, somebody who's barking in your face the way I am, it may not be quite as appealing to hear it, but if you listen to the lyrics and you listen to what Murray and others put to music, it's a way of kind of subtly, I don't know, getting the message across. So anyway, my hat's off to Murray Porter and his fine work. Hey, look, let me give a shout out to my sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses, Eric White and ERW Enterprises, my good friends Ed Schindler, Cynthia Trice, Neville Spring, Sugar Montour, and I want to thank the Seneca Nation for supporting the program. And I want to thank many who have helped this program in the past. I mean, obviously we still need support because we do this show. And obviously we keep up with equipment. We've got a special camera for our web streaming, our Facebook live streaming, and we've got brought Jake on to help with the videos and our video channel, our YouTube channel, Let's Talk Native TV. But I also make the trip to New York, and I'm able to bring Native issues to a talkback program in New York City. I mean, that's a pretty significant thing, and I couldn't do that without the sponsorship that I get from people here, not just the ones who are sponsoring today, but the ones who sponsored us all the way through. We're into our 8th year here, and couldn't have done it if I didn't have people who were willing to join in the fight and do their part. So I thank them all. I also want to thank Unity Stream and Apache Radio Net for providing our streaming, and I also want to thank CKWE for both the simulcasts and the rebroadcasts. Also, let me thank Netroots Radio and Real People's Media and Indigenous Resistance Radio for carrying Let's Talk Native on their networks. And I also got to do it each week. I got to give a shout out to all of you who share the program. You share my comments that I put on Facebook. You share the videos. My wife, she reposts the Facebook live stream on several group pages, and it's the way that we get the word out there so people understand. I think, a lot of times these issues aren't that complex. The problem is most people aren't talking about it. And so at very least, that's what I get to do. With this battle with the state, for instance, it's in a way, I'm providing a service to the Seneca Nation because I'm responding to everything that I see in print, to everything I hear on radio and everything I see on television. So the Seneca Nation doesn't have to. I mean, and they're certainly free to do that, and I'm not speaking for them. But I'm calling out the hypocrisy of the media. I'm calling out the hypocrisy of the local politicians, and in a way that I don't have to be quite as diplomatic as as President Gates has to be, or anybody else, or as diplomatic as their lawyers have to be. I can just I can call it the way I see it, and which is what I do. So. Again, it's an opportunity for me to have conversations that encourage conversations, and that's what we're hoping to get from you. One of the reasons we do the Facebook live stream is because it gives us an opportunity to see, for you to weigh in with some comments and to offer your thoughts, and maybe call me out, saying no, I got that wrong, or if I get a date wrong. A lot of times I'll throw something out there because I can't recall a name or a place or. And then even when Matt Hill isn't in the studio, if he's home listening, he'll look it up and he'll plug the right answer in, or one of my other friends who kind of listen to the show on a regular basis. So I appreciate that. Look, I also want to make sure that people do check out our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. We do post the videos of the programs on YouTube. but we also shoot some shorter videos to address issues, and perhaps Jake and I will do one this week. There's a couple of things that kind of eating on me a little bit that I think uh, warrant a conversation. And of course, I write, and I guess you could call me a freelance columnist. I've written some columns over the years. Many of those things could all by themselves be videos in of themselves, and so at some point we're going to take the time and shoot the 3 to 10 minute videos on a variety of subjects, get them all out there on our YouTube channel, and I encourage people to check them out, share them. Not every topic that we talk about. Obviously, we're talking about economics here a little bit, and a little bit of a dry subject, and perhaps not everybody's that enthusiastic about talking about economy. But, we just sometimes you just got to do it. You got to understand that in order for us to survive, and this is why talking about economy matters. We are being sold a bill of goods. Every university, including the local ones here in Western New York, every university in the United States, they use one of the same taglines. They say, "We're preparing our young people for the global economy," and I say bullshit. Because if all we're doing is preparing people for the global economy, what the hell happened to the local economy? Because if you want to do, again, in the first half hour about dollars changing hands locally. If we don't do more to make sure that commerce is first and foremost a local transaction, then what we're doing is we're bleeding every dollar that comes into a community by sending it out right off the bat. I mean, for the Seneca Nation and for any native territory, that's always a problem. Because to the extent that we do have money that comes into our territories, however it gets there, whether it's through programs, federal programs, or whether it's through, extractive industries or gaming or whatever else, the problem is we don't have the ability to retain those dollars in our territories for very long. But in a region, and here, and it's one of the differences for the Seneca Nation is we do have a fairly vibrant population around us. We've got Buffalo, we've got Niagara Falls, we've got Rochester. We have an area here in Western New York where pretty much everything is available to us. So we don't have to go very far to retain services or products or to attain products. Unfortunately, we have to leave our territories to do it. Sooner than we'd like to. I mean, if we want to buy gas and cigarettes, we don't have to. But short of that, I mean, there's a lot of the products we have to leave our territory for. But that's a benefit to the region. And ultimately, even if we had grocery stores on our territory, the dollars are going into any of our retail on our territories. The next step is off our territories. This is what economy is, right? And they say, I mean, and I've heard it said, that a dollar's got to change hands at least, 5 to 7 times for it to get its maximum value in an economy. So the shorter that span is, the fewer number of times that dollar changes hands before it leaves the region, the more of a drain it is on the economy. So again, when I talk about $100 million leaving the region, going to Albany, because that money doesn't come back, folks. 25% came back in various ways. But that the rest of that money, Albany just does what Albany does. Sure, they'll make their arguments about Buffalo Billion, but they'll never say that Buffalo Billion is the same $1 billion that they took from Seneca's, because then somehow Albany doesn't get credit for that. See, that's not the way it works, right? Politically. So for all of our sakes, and that's why a lot of the food sovereignty movement is so important. The more we start looking at produce and not just growing our own food, but buying local food and trying to do more in the local economy, that's the stuff that's gonna save us all. Because when everything else goes to hell, if there is an economic crash, and there's always the potential. I mean, I don't think people realize back in 2008 when the housing market crashed and the banks all almost bellied up. I mean, they almost shut those banks almost closed their doors. The federal government threw billions of dollars at those banks. They dropped interest rates so the banks could stay afloat. They bailed them out. Right now, there is more operating on lines of credit today, far more than in 2008. The federal government couldn't bail out banks today. You talk about too big to fail. So what recourse do we have? Can we stop, a big bank from tanking the economy? No. But the more we can do locally, the more we are friends and neighbors and we support each other economically and in any other way. I mean, the more supportive we are towards each other close by, the more independent we are from, again, these global tycoons. The less we have to shop at Walmart, the better. The more we can do locally, the better. And that's why this debate, even with Niagara Falls and Buffalo and Salamanca, I mean, I don't know what to say about and it isn't just the Democrats. Again, I don't know what to say about the Republicans who are afraid to say, thumb their nose up at Andrew Cuomo and say, no, we're gonna meet with the Senecas. We're gonna do what we can, and I don't care. I mean, at this point, at some point, it doesn't even have to be the city leaders. It could be community leaders, churches, unions, trade organizations. I mean, schools. I mean, Seneca's got the offer out there, and it's just really a shame that that the phone's not ringing. I mean, it really is a shame the phone's not ringing because I think people are really missing an opportunity, and that opportunity becomes even larger when you consider the fact that the Seneca Nation is going to save $120 million by not sending it to Albany each year. I'm not saying they got holes burning in their pockets, but whatever they do with those dollars, it will ultimately have a regional benefit. And I again, every one of those folks saying that they hope that the governor can squeeze the Senecas for that 25% of their gaming revenue is wishing for a bad thing. And there's no other way to put it. Hey, look, I want to do a couple of things. I wanted to get through. This Thursday, I will be doing my show, my Thursday New York City show. I'll be doing here from our studio. So again, we'll be Facebook Live. We're Facebook Live with that show every Thursday from 10 till noon. Anyway, usually we're Facebook Live from New York, but we'll be doing it here from our studios on the Cattaraugus territory of Seneca Nation, and we essentially live stream that on my Let's Talk with John Kane page, but I share them with both of my major pages, the Let's Talk Native and Let's Talk. So if you're on Facebook on Thursday from 10 till noon, check out my New York show. It's a 2-hour show. Normally that's a talkback show in New York. I just don't have the phone systems here or the personnel to screen calls. So I may bring somebody on by telephone, but we'll probably not do a bunch of live calls. But anyway, that's normally my show that's on WBAI in New York City. That goes from 10 till noon on Thursday morning. So by all means, check that out. Hey, the other thing I want to point out, if you are seeing us on Facebook Live, you see that I've got my MMIW. It looks like a flag, but it's really a banner. I had a banner printed for my Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women image that I created for the purposes of creating flags. It is my attempt to draw attention to the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women, and this gives you an idea what it looks like. It's behind me on our wall. I will at some point go to print with some flags, and this isn't an economic venture for me. And whatever I do, I'm going to try to generate enough dollars for this cause to print flags, and I don't plan to really sell them. My plan is to distribute them and get them out there. I think we're going to see if we can get the Seneca Nation to fly a couple of these at either at their administration buildings or any of the places that they have flagpoles up. Missing and murdered Indigenous women is a big issue, and frankly, we could expand that. We could say missing and murdered Indigenous women and children, for that matter, because a lot of these are young girls and even young boys that are turning up missing for some of the same reasons, and those reasons, a lot of those reasons, being just a lack of law enforcement, a lack of investigators, and frankly, a lack of care and concern from law enforcement. So we're trying to raise awareness about this issue. It's kind of an issue that has gained a certain amount of attention on the Canadian side. They've called for, commissions to explore and to investigate and to look at missing and murdered Indigenous women, and some of that has been frustrating because of the nature of those commissions, how they've been constructed, who's actually running them, and that kind of thing. But from a Native standpoint, we know that it's a real issue, and we need to give it attention. And one of the ways I think that has to start is with raising awareness. And the reason that I created the flag, and as you see the image behind me, I hate to have to explain it, but it's kind of self-evident. But the white silhouette represents the missing women, and of course the black shadow with the white chalk line around it represents the murdered women. And I constructed the flag in such a way that it's reversible. It'll say MMIW on the front side, just like it will on the back side. So there's a method to the madness that went into the design. I'm hoping that as I get this image out there, that it will be one of those iconic images that that shows up on all of our lands, on all of our territories. So people become, people ask, well, what does MMIW stand for? What does that mean? And they'll ask about it. And it's the whole intent is to have the conversation. We see it all the time when there's an Amber Alert or when somebody turns up missing in major metropolitan areas, but it's harder to have those effective systems in place on Native territories, and part of it is the apathy. We just don't get the attention. And if you haven't had a chance to go out and see Wind River, that's a film that addresses it somewhat. I mean, it's a decent film. It doesn't encapsulate the full and broadest sense of the problem, but it does give you a bit of it warrants a major motion picture. So I think it's worth checking out, and hopefully when you see a film like that or you see this flag flying, you'll want to take more attention and pay more attention to it. And as you see causes that are either generating either input or participation or dollars, that perhaps you'll feel enough of a sense of urgency that you're going to want to step up and play a role in bringing attention and bringing some solutions and some corrective actions towards this problem. In my lifetime, I've seen too many occasions where Native people have been victims of foul play that never properly got addressed, and none more than our women. And of course, it's like with anything else. I mean, when people talk about rape and some of this other these sexual assaults, there's this debate, almost like victim blaming or victim shaming. Oftentimes, when it comes to missing and murdered Indigenous women, we'll hear people try to make excuses like, well, it's again, victim blaming. And even when you attempt that, you're ignoring what I spoke about in earlier in the show. The prospects for the future that our territories represent, and the kind of the nowhereness that that many young people in particular can feel about their territories. We lead in so many of the categories that people don't want to see their names on as far as topping the list: alcoholism, substance abuse, suicide, teen pregnancy, high school dropout, unemployment, mortality rate, infant mortality rate. All of that stuff, depression, and of course, poverty. And every one of those circumstances was created by U.S. policy. And it started with obviously, extermination, and then removal, removing us from our homelands, pushing us onto lands that were not as profit or prosperous, I guess, or self-sustaining. eradicating the buffalo herd, so people who, so our brothers and sisters from the plains who lived off of that would have no sustenance. It has to do with exploiting our territories and everything from mineral extraction to frankly, murder in residential schools. And murder. I comes to mind the Osage murders, residential schools. The whole idea of trying to eliminate our culture, eliminate and rob our children from and break that line, that thread, that connectivity from generation to generation. So many of the trauma that our people experience today was intentional. It was inflicted upon our people, and there's so much that still exists today. And when we talk about the mascot issue and some of the other things that happen on a daily basis, the way, I literally just got an email from somebody on a completely different subject, and they used an expression called the one little Indian dynamic. I didn't even know what the hell that meant. But how does a Jewish woman use an expression like that and not think that it has any kind of racial, offense to it? Or where you'll hear talking heads on the television refer to somebody, yeah, he really went off the reservation on that one. Well, what the hell does that mean? Well, we kind of know what it means. But see, a racist expression like that, beyond the mascot issue, there is language that has crept into the American, lexicon, so much so that people just say things without even any consideration for what it even means or where the origins of those words come from. The idea that we have to have a debate over whether the word redskin is a racial slur is just, it's absurd. I mean, when you talk about things like discrimination, what could possibly be more discriminating than referring to somebody simply by the color of their skin? As if we aren't a human being, we are just that, those top layers of our skin. I mean, it's like referring to somebody as just a bodily organ. And that's what it is. I mean, they don't even say red man. They say red skin. So they even dehumanize us with the use of a word like that. And and as I'm explaining it here today, there's probably a few people say, I never really thought about that. Well, how is it you could not have thought about that? How is it that we can be at this level of the information age, and still have so many people just be absolutely oblivious to the offensive nature of so much of American society as it relates to people of color, and again, that unique racism that is inflicted upon Native people. That's why we do what we do here. That's why we have the show. That's why I write what I write, and I encourage you to check out. I mean, obviously we post these shows on my Facebook group pages, but I do write, if not columns for the media, and I got to tell you, I can't get a column in the Buffalo News every week. I can't get one in there more than once a month. In fact, I wrote a column, and when I submitted one, 30 days later, they said, well, we've printed you recently. So I've got to look like every couple of months that I could try to send even a letter to the editor into the Buffalo News. And the same thing goes with other publications. So to hit the mainstream media, it's very difficult. So my solution is to respond to the articles that are in there. And that's what I did with the Niagara Gazette article. So you can see that's on my Facebook group page. You can go to Let's Talk Native and see my response. You can go to the link to the page. And the other thing is, I post these on, a lot of times I'll post these on various group pages like Niagara Falls Uncensored. Or if you look on the articles themselves, I'll post a comment in the forum associated with those, with that media platform. So I try to be responsive, and I look forward to your comments and your critiques or criticisms. Direct me. If you think I'm missing something, then point it out to me, and I'll try to get it the next time. But this is what I do, and I do it because it's kind of my passion, but it's also I may be in kind of a unique position to be as responsive as I am. And so, again, call on me to make sure that I don't miss something. And if you see something that you think needs a response, and by all means respond to it if you can. And I encourage as many people as possible to respond to these kinds of media pieces. But if you don't want to respond, then bring it to my attention, and damn it, I'll try to respond. So that's I guess that's my comment. Hey, look, again, Thursday, 10 till noon, catch us Facebook live stream here. And, of course, we'll be back here on Friday, and we'll do it all again. And Jake and I will work on a video this week, and we'll try to get something out to you guys to mull over and chew on. So we'll do that as well. Well, that's it for here. And we'll go out with another Murray Porter song. How about some Little White Lies from Murray Porter and Pappy John's band?